Hey guys, I'm Tiffany, and this is Objection Overruled. So today we are going to dive right into the Crystal Rogers case. I had debated on waiting and doing this after closing arguments and probably just the very end, but I can't. There's so much to unpack here. It's starting way back because there's so many people right now, like especially in all of the groups that are discussing this, that are just like, oh no, we're doomed. Like, she's not going to get justice. The jury didn't hear enough. And I think that the reason that is because people who have followed this case for the past 10 years are so much more aware of so many more things that are either inadmissible and could not be brought in, or for whatever reason they weren't brought in, right? So it's it's sad. Um, but let's talk about what the jury got. Let's talk about the things they did get. And it's really hard, like I said, for us who have followed it for so long, to be objective. But there have been a few people that I've talked to that, and they've not like watched this trial nonstop. They've seen snippets of the news reporters and stuff, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, like he's got to go." So let's start way back. First day, Crystal's daughter testifies that she tries to call her mom that day and she doesn't answer. And they talk about how unusual that is. Not just unusual, like it wasn't something that happened. Um, so then they talk to two friends, right? Who say that they saw her that day and she was excited about a surprise date that Brooks had planned. I don't know about you, but if someone was going to surprise me with a date and I was playing on my phone the whole time at a farm, something's not adding up, right? So we have that. And remember, too, that Crystal's daughter tried to call Brooks also, and he didn't answer that call. The following day, I want to say they said 15 calls to his phone. He only answered one, from his mom. Now, he said he had been reaching out to people to see where Crystal was, to see if they had heard from her. And they didn't answer, or they didn't know where she was, whatever. But you would think if that were true, when people associated with her are calling him, he's going to answer, right? Like, oh my gosh, have you heard from her? Or maybe this is her. Maybe your phone's dead and she's using somebody else's. He's not just going to ignore those calls. And I think a reasonable jury will think about that. So then let's get into, I'm trying to think of the next big, got some notes here, sorry. Let's see. So then we had Detective Snow. Let's get right into the interviews, right? I've never seen anything that looked like it belonged in a Lifetime movie more, okay? This interview, I think a 6-year-old could have been like, was that an actor? Like his answers were ridiculous. The Nancy Grace interview, oh, that's an excellent question and I want to answer it. Like, give me a break. People do that, they respond that way when they're trying to think of something to say so they can drag that out. BS. And anybody could see that. Nick calling him, telling him to get up and leave. And there's a lot of stuff on the internet right now about the luminol in his car. Like, it didn't yield anything. So luminol is preemptive, right? It shows what could possibly be there. Um, but let's think about this. Nick's phone was off for 24 hours at least. Do you think he could not have cleaned anything up in 24 hours? Again, in my eyes, a reasonable jury could conclude that. They wouldn't have to have that spelled out for them to realize that that's a possibility. Then we look at Brooks' statement that he took an hour and 20 minutes to write 8 pages of absolute garbage. So I have heard people saying, well, he wrote more of what he would be doing. It was kind of like a to-do list. Well, that's not what he was asked for. He wasn't asked for what would you typically do that day. He was asked, what did you do that day? And looking back at any traumatic event that I've ever been through, I might not remember yesterday what I ate for lunch or this morning if I turned the dishwasher on. But when there's a traumatic event, these things get seared into our memories. So he had all these coulda, shoulda, woulda dones, and then all the testimony of all those people saying, nope, never heard from him, didn't see him, office was closed, I was out of town, like whatever. Never happened, even though, let's just say it was a to do list. So you're telling me that that entire day, you can't remember a single thing you did. And not only that, you should have been able to remember because your phone was at your farm all day long. You didn't go anywhere. Or did you? Was it just your phone that was at the farm while you were out doing some shady stuff, trying to get ready for what was about to happen? Because your phone's at the farm, your brother's phone's turned off. Coincidence? Well, when it comes to court cases, I don't believe in coincidences, okay? And I don't think you should either. The funniest thing to me, and it's not funny, it's disgusting, but I couldn't help but laugh. These opening statements, it's been reported, that Shane Young was like, you have got to use your God-given common sense. Well, the only people in a courtroom who are allowed to use common sense are jurors. The laws are so stringent, and I mean, like this whole 410 rule, like it's not just 410, it's like 410(1)(b)(a), like to a T. They fight over these wordings about commas or conjunctions, like it's crazy. But the jury's allowed to use common sense. But then you have a defense attorney get up and say, you can't use common sense in a murder trial? Where else should you use it? That was the most asinine statement I think I've ever heard. So let's get past that. So we're going to the next day. He is still on the stand. That's, to me, those are the biggest things that stick out. So another thing, like why would Crystal run off when she's planning to meet with a friend to have pizza with her kids? Like she had other things planned the next week. Like, so she's just gonna drop her baby that she never leaves and run away and never be heard from again? That's ridiculous. Let's see. Remember, they saw the Walmart surveillance video where she was with her kids. The tips that were called in that did not pan out. Crystal's neighbor saying that her car was gone by 6:30. Even Brooks said Crystal didn't wake up early. She was not an early riser, right? The baby wasn't an early riser. He was used to being up and at it over midnight, which, whatever. Some kids, I have a kid who doesn't sleep, whatever. But her car is gone by 6:30 the next morning, and that instantly sent off some kind of feeling to that neighbor. And another thing, Crystal didn't drive her car to the farm, right? She rode with Brooks. So how was her car gone? Where'd her car leave from? We'll talk about that soon. So we talked about how all of that was played out, all of his excuses for where he was. Let's see. That's still about the interview. So they did hear a recording of Steve Lawson, in the trial, where where Brooks calls him and is like, hey, now do you remember you called me the other night? Now I found a slip up, okay? And here's the slip up. As soon as he gets on the phone and Brooks is asking him about doing some work or whatever. He's like, yeah, them rentals, and I was wanting them numbers. That right there should send out like red flags like it's a carnival, okay? Brooks hadn't asked him why he called yet. He was asking him about work. Just chew on that for a minute. And later, I didn't happen in this trial because for some odd reason that I cannot figure out, they were not allowed to bring in his testimony. Everything that I've tried to read says it should have been able to be brought in. I think the only reason, and it's like a hairline, is because he would have had to testify. I don't understand that because he has already testified. Anyways, that whole phone call was so ridiculously staged. I mentioned the Nancy Grace interview. Let's see. Okay, so he talks about the first call that he made to try to reach Crystal was at 9:06 a.m. Okay, and in total, he tried calling her 3 times. All went to voicemail, and he texted her once with no response. The prosecution played video showing Brooks was already up and was going to the farm at 7:28 that morning. I believe it was his testimony that he woke up at 8:30 or 9. Let's see. So then let's remember the Radio Shack, which I don't really know why the prosecutor thought that was important in this trial. I can see where it will be important later. But the owner of that Radio Shack had saved a still of her surveillance, a still image that she had taken from her surveillance of Brooks Houck. She saved the receipt, a copy of the receipt, where he wanted a top of the line recorder. And that was on July 6th. Okay? So if we're saying that late the night of the 3rd into the 4th is when Crystal disappeared, what is when she disappeared, we're saying this is where everything went down. The 6th, he's buying a recorder. Later it comes up that Rhonda McElvoy, his sister, she did record the grand jury, but she didn't know the rest of the family was. Nobody's going to buy that. Nobody's going to buy that. If that's expired cheese with visible mold, nobody's buying it, okay? Not to mention all the recording devices were found together in one place, so nobody knew about it, but somehow they all ended up in one place. There was a transcript of her saying she didn't want to do it, and Brooks saying, no, you have to. Nick needs the testimony. Who's Nick? The dirty cop brother who was fired from the police department, who sold a gun believed to be, not proven yet, but believed to be, the gun that killed Tommy Ballard. He did it under an alias. Too bad he did it to an undercover, right? So we've got all that, all the recording stuff. They were so paranoid. It's been less than 48 hours, but they're so paranoid that they're out buying recording devices and they're going to record their statements. It was shown that they believe Brooks had a recording device when he met with Detective Snow, John Snow. He was fidgeting in his pocket, and that was recorded. And you'll remember during that interview when he writes his 8-page, hour and 20-minute statement of complete BS, that he's like fidgeting in his pocket and he's reading it out loud. reading his own statement out loud, which he was provided a copy of, and he knew that it was being recorded by them. Whatever. Let's go to. I just want to make sure I'm not skipping anything important. Here's a good one. Heather Snillen. And now she was the girlfriend of Steve Lawson. She owned the Chrysler 300 with him. And she made a huge statement that she heard Steve Lawson and Joey Lawson talking about moving a body at the Houck family farm with a skid steer. Now, she withheld that information until a 2023 interview with KSP and said that she was scared and feared for herself as a single mother. So apparently she was on meth. Joey was her supplier. She stopped using meth in 2023, and she was always concerned back then about sharing the information because her main focus were drugs. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you know what, she was on meth, so she's not reliable. People on meth get clean. It happens, believe it or not. And when people are on meth, they tend to be very detail oriented. It's like the strongest dose in the world of ADHD medicine, right? Like hyper focused. It does not surprise me that she would have these details. Her relationship with Steve Lawson ended sometime in 2014. And then after Steve Lawson's wife died in 2017, they got back together. So there was also a builder that had worked for Brooks that said she didn't like Crystal, but Crystal was an amazing mother. She said that she had asked Brooks why he didn't leave Crystal because all they did was fight. And she said that he replied he would not lose Eli. Now, the defense said that how earlier she had said that Crystal was a drug addict and a drunk and she couldn't stand her. And she said everything that was said on TV was a lie. Which TV is made to entertain. There's always going to be some elements that are over dramatized. That's just the way it is. I don't think there's really any such thing as reality TV. Okay. So then, let's see. These are more people saying they had never seen seen Brooks that day. Let's see. I'm just going through some notes here. Oh, so this was interesting on a lot of counts, and I cannot wait till this video is released and be able to see this myself. I think a lot of people are going to have a hard time because just something as simple as a conjunction, when you're listening to two different reporters, like that can change the whole dynamic, right? Like it can really change a sentence. So, and they've said it's really hard to hear in there. They've also pointed out, just side note, that whenever there's an objection, usually any court that or trial that I've ever watched, when there's an objection, they give the reason for the objection. The judge either sustains or overrules. They come back. Whoever the opposing party is has a chance to argue that. Not in this case. So what's been said is that every objection ends up in a type of sidebar here where the court cannot hear it. Another interesting little tidbit is the jury is allowed to ask questions, and they've had some questions, some really good questions. Sorry about that. So the whole Heather Snelling thing. So when Brian Butler was cross-examining her, he really took this in a whole other direction. It does not surprise me a bit. But she's very emotional and she's very upset because it was not like an interview like tell me what you know, tell me if you think anything. Like this was an interrogation. Like you're about to tell us the truth today, right? And they went full force on her. And I'm not saying it's wrong or it's right. I'm just saying that's what happened. Well, Brian Butler's like, gosh, they were really mean to you. And she's like, like she's agreeing with everything he says, and this is a state's witness that's very unusual to say the least. But I think he was really just trying to bring up like how bad she was grilled by these interrogators. Moving on. Um, Now, she went back on her own in 2023 to talk to them again. She said that at that time they were really nice to her. Um, she didn't mention the conversation that she had heard about both Lawsons moving a body at that time. But the defense is basically saying she was coerced into saying that. So, if I remember correctly, I can't find it in here, but if I remember correctly, when on rebuttal, Shane Young was like, okay, so nobody's coercing you here. What's the truth? And she said everything I said was the truth. So that was about them moving, her overhearing them moving the body. And I know that this is a super watered down version, but they've been in court now, I believe, 10 days. That's the only way to get all this in one video. There was a phone records expert who said that, let's see, that Steve Lawson was on Bluegrass Parkway. Now we know this, but they don't know this. He already admitted to that. He admitted that he moved the seat back in Crystal's car, that he got a bat out of that car that had belonged to Joey, a bat that he had got for him. And it wasn't, from what I understand, this was not a full size bat. It was one of the ones that anyone gets when they go to the Louisville Slugger Museum. But still, like, valid. Why would you be in this car, moving a seat back, picking your son up from it? For what? Why would that happen? Of course, in this trial, that has not been allowed to come in, and Brian Butler has done everything he can to suggest that they were on a road that runs parallel to that Bluegrass Parkway. I mean, I can see where a jury might struggle with that since they don't know all the facts, which is completely unfair. So, there were a couple people who said that they did see Crystal's car. One I believe worked at Lowe's and one worked at Dollar General. Both of them were traveling through that area between 10 and 10:30, and her car was already there, which kind of debunks the fact that they say she was playing games on her phone after midnight. Her phone was not working after midnight. It had been powered off, so manually powered off. It died around 9:27 p.m. It was manually turned back on and then, or started to come back on and then manually turned off. I think they said within 30 seconds. Okay, then we had that same neighbor that I talked about earlier saying that she had never seen Rosemary or Nick at Crystal's house. They were actually friends. Their kids stayed the night together with each other. They did things like they weren't just neighbors, they were friends. And she said that she had never seen the house there. And she had been off for maternity leave. She had just had a baby. And, like when you have a baby, a newborn, you're pretty much at home. So she says in those days following Crystal's disappearance, Nick and Rosemary were at that house every single day. Now, there's testimony about some bags. So apparently, Rosemary and Nick, the day after Crystal disappeared, they pull up to Brooks, they get out, they go in the house. She said it's just a couple minutes, they're back out, and they turn their cars around and back them with the trunks up to the basement doors. Now, this does get kind of foggy for me because depending on which reporter you watch, I don't know if the testimony was that they brought white bags out and put them in the trunks, or they took white bags out of their trunks and put them in Brooks' house. I kind of would see it leaving Brooks and going, but I don't know, so I can't promise any of that. She's talked about how Crystal had planted some flowers, some beautiful purple flowers outside. That was her testimony. And Rosemary made it a point to dig those up and throw them away. This is the kind of person I am, but I assure you, the minute they left that house, I would have been over there replanting them and then watching them freak out when they got back. Now, the reporters talked a lot about how they really weren't hearing a lot about Joseph Lawson. And as far as all of their reporting goes, I have to say, I really haven't either. There were the few statements of people saying, what they had overheard and things of that nature, but that's about it. Now, Nick Houck, speaking of Nick, his former girlfriend testified. She's the one that told us that he was gone from the early in the morning on the 3rd until I think it was mid morning on the 4th. They were moving at the time, and she said that she was upset because, this was planned. This move was planned. They had to be out by that Monday, so they were supposed to be doing this together. And not only was he not there, didn't come home that night, like when she woke up the next day, he's still not home. And that entire time, his phone was turned off. Now, she had said she had went by the new house a couple of times. I think she had taken a few loads over there, and he was not there. She did end up seeing his phone there. When she asked him where he had been, he said that he had been doing work at the new house. And the reason I guess that's kind of important is she said that this house really wasn't livable. It was a fixer-upper. She was not happy about that. But she said that she did not notice any work that had been done over there. So there's that. And now, apparently, there was a whole lot of work that needed to be done. So I guess it was possible for her to miss something. But she said it didn't appear anything had been done. The defense, which I think was just a smart aleck move, they were like, well, when he showed up, did he have blood on him? Was he covered in mud? No. Like, when you're gone 24 hours, you'd think you'd have time to take a shower, clean up a little, huh? There were 2 IRS criminal investigators that also testified, Charlie Birch and Chad Warner. They talked about search warrants that they did at Rosemary's house. That's where they found all those voice recorders. One of them was in some blue jeans in a closet. I guess they were like bunched up and thrown in a corner on the floor. And then the other ones were in a bag of bingo stamps. And they happened to open that bag and dump it out. And out came the recorders. This is where the jurors asked some questions. So originally, it wasn't said that was Rosemary's house. They just gave the address, and the jurors wanted to know whose house is that. Like, they're paying attention. Um, and they asked if Nick had ever told Amber why he had left his phone there, and she said no, that he just said he was working. Okay, and now here comes a witness that I mean, I know that some people are like, because of the things he said, but I wish they would have never put him on the stand. And I'm talking about Charlie Girdley. Guys, this man, like, his story has changed so much. There's no way that you can choose which one is real, if any of them. Um, he was an employee of Brooks, and he had went to Rosemary's house to help Brooks pour some concrete sometime after Crystal went missing. He said he overheard Rosemary say that they'd have been better off if she was gone a long time ago. There was an objection. Of course, we don't know what happened in the objection. Uh, Apparently, Girdley is the guy that Steve Lawson approached to tell him that Brooks was looking to get rid of Crystal, and he says he just laughed and went about his way. Steve Lawson had said that he was the wrong guy, that Steve's the wrong guy, but Girdley'd be the one to do it. And I'll just be honest, like, because of all his lies, because of all the craziness, because of those comments, I just feel like he has more meat in the game. Like, I don't feel like he's, of course, like he's being honest. Like, I'm not sure if he knows how to be honest. They said that during the rebuttal, like the defense attorney, like put up a paper and he had these different colored markers and he like draws something to show one story, like from one date, and uses a different marker to draw the other story, like to really give a visual to the jury of like, he's what my mama used to say. He'd rather climb a tree and tell a lie than stand on the ground and tell the truth. Amen, sister. Okay. Okay, so now Girdley is testifying that the night of the 3rd, Joey Lawson picked him up in a Chrysler 300 and took him to 62 South. That's a bar where Steve Lawson's ex-girlfriend at the time spotted the Chrysler 300 that she owned with him. At some point, they leave the bar to meet up with Brooks to get his pay for the week. Brooks gave Joey a set of keys at the time that were Crystal's keys, and Joey said that he just had to put some brakes and rotors on it. He couldn't remember what time that was, but he did say it was still daylight. All this is so odd. And that's what I'm saying. With his stories, like, none of them make sense. I wish they wouldn't have even brought him in. Okay. The phone records did show that Brooks was out and about in Bardstown on the 3rd before returning home around 4:43. So I guess when this reporter that I'm reading from said out and about, what he was talking about was there was a stop at like a lumber supply store or something. I'm not sure if that's what he's talking about, because all of the phone record testimony so far has been that up until 4 o'clock that day, and I can't remember if it was 8 or 9 that morning, but up until 4 o'clock that day, his phone never left the farm. Now, Girdley also says that Joey Lawson said something to him about burying a car with a skid steer and no one will ever find it. I will say another reporter reported on this same bit of testimony that he said he would bury her and they would never find her. So, again, between Girdley's lies and like the small differences in reporting, because again, it's hard to hear, you just want to hear it for yourself. And that's one of his notes. He says it's very difficult to hear Girdley, but he's mentioning a lot of information about interactions between Houck and the Lawsons in the evening of the 3rd. He was on the stand for quite a while, but so it was at least 5 varying versions that he gave detectives about all of this. And the defense was even playing clips of interviews, and he was just like, I can't remember. I don't remember. There's a lot of memory issues in this trial, and that's awful. I really don't want to go off any more of his lies. Let's see, because I just don't feel like I feel like if I'm on the jury, I'm not even taking into consideration any part of Girdley's testimony. Then, so the 27th witness was Brian Cecil, and he was on the Houck farm the night of the 3rd. He was hunting with a couple of other guys. I think it was a coon hunting competition or tournament, or maybe there was something. They were on a logging road in the woods behind Rosemary's house, and they saw a white car parked there. He said he thought it was strange, but didn't, take photos or get the license plate. The car didn't appear disturbed. And these are notes from Brennan Kane. He's out of Bowling Green. He just said it was strange. It was out of place being on that gravel road. You don't say. So he first talked to police in 2019. That was when the FBI talked to him, according to the defense. But the defense produced a document that said Cecil talked to Deputy Bryan with the sheriff's office in 2016. He said he never remembered doing that. And it turns out that Deputy Bryan is Crystal's brother-in-law. I'm not really sure why that matters. Cecil said it was raining pretty hard that night. He could barely hear his dogs. He said that he didn't ever hear any gunshots or screams or machinery. But he did say they was very loud due to the rain. Which is another thing. Like, so your great date night on the farm is also in the rain? Like, what did you all do? Like, did he sit on his phone and play games and you sat on your phone and played games? But no, because he says y'all were walking around feeding cows for 4 hours in the rain on the farm. Okay. So, I'm not even going to mention, you all have heard the ridiculous statement that Girdley made, and I'm not even going there. But if you know, you know. There was testimony that Anna Whiteside's car had a hair in it that was consistent with Crystal Rogers. So there wasn't a DNA profile taken on this hair. I believe it's probably because it's one hair. The whole thing would be consumed. There would be no way to test it later or further. If something comes up where they can use less of a hair to test it, like they wanted to preserve that, but the characteristics were the same as hers, not the same as Anna Whiteside's. And the car was consistent with the one that the coon hunters saw that night. And this is really interesting. So if you have followed this case for all this time, you know that Tommy Ballard I always say he was the lead investigator in this case. He was going to find his daughter come hell or high water. I believe he did find her, just not the way we all wish he would have. He had put up a post about needing information about this white car. So I believe it was 2 days later. No, maybe 4 days later. He made the post April 28th. And then it was sold May 2nd. So 4 days. Within 4 days of that post going up, the car is sold. And they said that the guy at the dealership said, I heard this in, I want to say it was Shay's post, that Nick was the one leading the sale, right? Anna was there, but it was Nick, like he's doing the talking, she's just kind of following behind him. Well, the car salesman said, it was just really odd because he had this stipulation of selling the car that it had to be sight unseen, like as far as inside, and we couldn't go through anything. And he said he had been selling cars for how many ever years? It was a lot of years. And he had never had that happen. I thought that was interesting as well. I wish they would have asked, like, the price. Like, was that he was giving it to him for some amazing price, or doesn't matter if they didn't ask. Um, They also did show video of a car going to the Houck farm at 3:30 in the morning on 7/4 and leaving at 3:45. That's very interesting. We talked about the hair being in the back of that car, and there was also a cadaver dog search at the impound lot in Jefferson County. And the car did hit on that trunk. Now, the defense brought people in saying that because this dog was trained on live searches and cadavers, that it wasn't very credible. But it is possible those dogs do exist, and they do use them in searches successfully often. Like, that's just a fact. Like, go look it up. Don't count on me for that. Um, so that's where the defense tried to poke holes in it with this other dog expert. And what it's going to come down to is which expert the jury believes, right? Because what the state had their cell phone expert, which he's very, very sought after in trials. I heard Nick Mudd say that, he's not just the best in Kentucky, he's the best in like the eastern United States. He knows his stuff. He did Google GPS data, which is more reliable than cell phone data. And then there was a guy from U of L that was on for the defense. And he was just saying that it was more likely that they were on Boston Road uh, because of the way on a cell phone tower you have panels going north, east, south, and west, right? Like 4 different directions, and it's those panels that your phone will hit on. And I guess by the panel that theirs hit on, it was more likely he was on Boston Road, which that'd be a great theory and all, except he already confessed. Too bad the jury doesn't know that. That's egregious to me. That's ridiculous. Now, Frances Holt testified, and she was is the paternal aunt to Brooks and Nick. She said that her mother, Anna Whitesides, was very close to Nick, but not other members of the Houck family. Um, that's I really don't see anything else that she really contributed except for she did say that she wrote in her diary on July 4th that her mother was with her and her grandchildren. And she said she remembered that Anna ended up staying the night that night because when she went home, for some reason, she couldn't get her key to unlock the door. And when she called Nick, he didn't answer. And when she went to his house, he didn't answer the door. Let me see. It's, I'm trying to, we've been over a lot of this. You'll remember that they talked about how Brooks did not help in the search, and he said that the police told him not to because of the Ballard family and Rogers family believing he was involved from the get-go. I haven't heard anyone from the police confirm nor deny that. Um, they did talk a lot earlier about Rosemary Houck thinking Crystal was beneath their family. She didn't approve of her. Um, Sorry, I think I accidentally went way up. Okay, so they also heard from Barbara Coulter. She is the mother of Steve Lawson and the grandmother of Joey Lawson. She says that in 2022, um, Joey came to her house high on meth and said that, see, this won't surprise you. This guy, this guy was high on meth and said that Stevie killed Crystal. He needed to tell her something, and it was Stevie killed Crystal. And she said that, she told him he shouldn't say things like that unless they are absolutely true because it could cause a lot of drama. It's an interesting statement. Now, some of you may remember that she did testify in Steve Lawson's trial. This dude, I don't want to keep them on there long. That she was ashamed of Stevie, and even though she's a mother, she loves her son. Like, she did feel like he was involved, and I'm sure that was very, very hard for her to say. I can't imagine being a mom and being in that situation. It's really odd though that was her testimony in this trial, I think. There was another witness that testified, I don't see the name, about some conversations that they had with Brooks Houck a week before Crystal went missing. Now, you remember Crystal did all of the bookkeeping and stuff for the rental properties, the tax stuff. She took care of all that. Well, a week before she went missing, Brooks tells this CPA that his mother was handling all of this work and he was looking for someone new to be able to do that. He needed some recommendations. Well, it wasn't his mom that handled that. Crystal handled that. And you may remember some, so sorry, interviews that were done where Crystal told her mom, he thinks I'm an idiot, but I take care of the rentals, I take care of the taxes, and I have it all put up. And she says one of her biggest regrets is never asking Crystal where she put that stuff up. But she said they weren't even talking about Brooks at the time, that Crystal just said this. So there's that. It makes me really wonder about those white bags. Remember the white bags in the trunks? Steve Lawson's ex-wife also testified. She was the stepmom of Joey Lawson, and her daughter actually had a child with Joseph Lawson, so her stepbrother. Please don't start the Kentucky jokes. We ain't all like that. So she detailed the conversation that she overheard between her daughter and Joey. She said something about moving a car and $50,000. She also testified that when she first got with Steve in 2017, he had a lot of money very often. And she said for the bulk of their relationship, she was the one who often paid for everything. And she also said that Joey never had money. That's all very odd to me. She also told about a situation where Joey and Elizabeth were having a fight, and she and Steve went over to try to help settle it down. And at that time, Joey and Steve got into an altercation. They ended up like physically fighting. And at some point during that, they tumbled down 30 steps of concrete. They were exchanging words, and Joey told Steve, quote, "You keep on, and I'm going to let everybody know about this car and your involvement," end quote. Then they heard from Stacy Kramer, who was an employee who claims that Steve Lawson told her he had to take care of a girl on meth. She remembers him being in the car with Brooks for about 45 minutes. They were in a work truck. That apparently never happened. Like, that wasn't something that happened often. She had made a mistake on one of the properties. There was like a crack in a ceiling. She thought they were talking about her, that she was in trouble. And when she asked about it, he's like, "No, I got to take care of this girl on meth." She asked, like, "What do you mean you have to take care of her?" He didn't, like, come out and say anything, just take care of her. Uh, Years later, when I think it was I can't remember if it was KSP or the FBI. I can't find it. Oh no, it wasn't the FBI. She wore a wire to try to get him to talk about it again. And all he would say is I was probably talking about an ex of Joey's. She believed all along that it was Crystal Rogers. All right, that pretty much ended everything from the state. Uh, Judge Sims heard motions for a directed verdict, which is super common in trials. They always try to say, "Oh, they didn't prove anything, let our client go." Denied. Um, he really, they said that Judge Sims really pulled out all the stops though when he denied this motion, and detailed all the things of why a reasonable jury could find them guilty. And I thought that was very interesting that he's like, no, 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 because there was this, there was this, there was this, there was this, there was this. Um, and he did that for both defendants. Now, the list admittedly was it was much longer for Brooks Houck than it was for Lawson, but he was still like, no, no, a reasonable jury could find them guilty for sure. Some of the reporters did say that the family was very emotional when Judge Sims gave his ruling on that. I imagine they had been holding their breath the entire time. That's it's just not a good place to be. A courtroom, looking at the people or person who is believed to be responsible for the death of your loved one is 10 out of 10. Do not recommend. Can't, God, my heart breaks for them. Um, as far as the defense goes, so they did have the other canine trainer, the one that we talked about, said they um, shouldn't be cross trained. He said that came from back during 9/11 when there were ground searches. I guess I guess there were some issues with dogs who were cross trained. Um, just unpack that for a minute. Think about 9/11. Holy cow. Like, there was a whole lot of confusion going on. I'm sure a dog could have been confused. Just try to look back at some of those pictures of that scene and how many were lost and how many rescuers and how many injured and the building debris. And, I mean, the plane debris. Like, give me a break. Like, I could see that. I could see a dog really being confused during all of that. Um, so I'm not sure why. I really don't know why the prosecution didn't come back and talk about some cases where cross trained dogs were successful. I think that would have been beneficial. I guess that's why I'm not a prosecutor. Um, there was also, so two hunters testified about seeing that white car. The defense brought up one who says he does not remember seeing that. He also didn't remember how far up the road he went. He said he has a lot of memory problems, but he does not remember seeing a car on the gravel road near the Houck farm. And he did say that it had been raining, but it wasn't raining during the hunt. So he could have been there at a completely separate time of day. I don't know. Then Rhonda McElvoy took the stand, and she is the sister of Nick and Brooks. We touched on her a little bit earlier. She talked about how Crystal and Roger's son had or has an eye condition, and that was why Brooks had tinted his windows. The fishy part of that is, the timing, because he did it just days before this whole thing. So they said that he had had this eye condition since birth. Like I said, I do not believe in coincidences in court cases. Give me a break. Um, this is when she talks about how she didn't know that family members were recording the grand jury. I guess she thought it was only her. Shane Young was even showing her a transcript, and she's like, well, I just interpreted it differently. The transcript said how, where Brooks said, you have to, Nick needs the testimony. Well, how else do you interpret that? Like, please enlighten us. I don't understand. She says her family was just paranoid. The jury did have several questions about the son of Eli and Crystal's, Brooks and Crystal's son Eli's eye condition. She said that she was not in town on July 3rd, that she was actually in Louisville at the Science Center with her family. She had some time-stamped pictures to show that. Let's keep in mind she left there, she said, at 7. It took 5 minutes to get to the car, and it's an hour drive to Bardstown, putting her back July 3rd at 8 p.m. I'll just leave that there. The only other thing she talked about was how she had to move out of state because her family was being threatened and such because of all this. She didn't move back until her dad got sick with lung cancer, and ultimately ended up building a house on the farm. Not really sure what that has to do with anything. All right, that was really the gist of everything. They did have that expert that said that the tactics they used for those witnesses should have never been used, that they could have coerced them. I don't know. I guess you either feel in that case strongly one way or the other. And I honestly I can see both sides, so I'm not really gonna gonna go into any of that. Hmm. Yeah, that's about where it ends. So they're saying that on Monday, Lawson's team says they'll need about 30 minutes to an hour for their closing. Houck's attorney thinks they'll need about 2 hours, and then the prosecution will come in after lunch. So after that, they are going to send the jury home again, and then I believe it Tuesday morning is when they will get their detailed instructions and be sent to deliberate. That pretty much catches us up as far as the trial. Like, there would be so much more to unpack here, but I thought it was important to mention a few things. One is the clothing found by the FBI during that search. A lot of people are in an uproar because of the whole DNA factor. It does not matter. Remember, there was no DNA. So it's not just that crystals wasn't found, there was none. And also, you have to take into consideration cadaver dogs brought them to those driveways. That this is a whole neighborhood, right? They're in a neighborhood. The cadaver dogs brought them to this driveway. What do cadaver dogs find? I think I think if I'm sitting on a jury, I know Houck owns that property. I know that property's being built. When Crystal disappears, like, that's probably enough for me. As far as on the Lawson side of it, I don't know. I don't know that they really brought enough home against him. Do I think he's involved? Absolutely. Um, I just don't know that they'll have enough to convict him. So that's going to be it for me, guys, until we talk about the verdict, which I don't know. I'm thinking if since they're getting it first thing Tuesday morning, I really think we're gonna have a verdict Tuesday. That's just a guess. Then again, I don't know. Not everyone thinks the same way that I do. Obviously, we're just gonna have to see. So I can't wait to see what your thoughts are. Bye.